Hello and welcome back to Arsenal Analysed. Today I bring you instant reaction and analysis from the Aston Villa Arsenal game. And boy, what it was a treat for us in the end. Do go ahead and get your questions, your opinions in the chat box. We will look to digest and go through them all between now and the end of this show. But to kick things off, just to give you some of my sort of instant opinions and reaction to the game, I think the best way to possibly sum this up is that revenge is very, very sweet. We dropped all points against Aston Villa last season, and arguably some say that some of those results were down to us missing out on our first title in 20 years. But in this game, Arsenal managed to get over the line. And I know it's still very, very early on in the season, but it's these types of games that Arsenal need to make sure that they're winning and that they're grinding out to get those results, especially away from home. As you can imagine, there is plenty to talk about from this particular fixture. I'll be going through all of the analysis from the game, tactical analysis, player analysis, you name it. We'll be covering it during today's show. So do go ahead and hit that like button if you are looking forward to today's show, and subscribe if you're new around here, because we will be looking to cover each and every game this season on the channel. So I think a good place to start would be just to look at that first half. Let's break things down tactically. Let's have a look at some of the changes or some of the usuals that we come to expect from Arsenal from a tactical point of view. So Arsenal, both in and out of possession, we set up as per usual. If you're new around here and you're not too sure what that is, Arsenal typically defend in a 4-4-2 shape when out of possession. Obviously, that changes slightly when we're pressing in the final third. There's more of a 4 or 5 that press high up on in the pitch. But in possession, Arsenal played their usual 3-2-5 when in possession, when attacking. Typically, we would see Zinchenko play at left back. That was the only change from last week. Julian Timber came in for Zinchenko. And I think that's something that we'll see quite often throughout the season. And the reason for that is we all know and we've all come to expect that Zinchenko isn't necessarily the best defensively. Playing away at Villa Park, it's a really tough gig. He would have been marking Bailey today very, very quick, would have looked to exploit those gaps at our left back position. Hence why Timber came in, much more athletic, much more well-equipped defensively to cope at left back. And we did see him tuck in to midfield alongside Thomas Partey, allowing Declan Rice to kick on as more of a kind of box-to-box 8, if you will. So pretty much business as usual from an Arsenal point of view, tactically in terms of system, what we did in and out of possession. There wasn't anything that I noticed, at least from a tactical point of view. Please do let me know down in the comments if I have missed something or if you've noticed something that I've missed. Looking at Aston Villa in the way that they set up, yes, you've got your on-paper formation, if you want to call it that, but they were very kind of similar to Arsenal. Now, when they were defending deep, they were often sat in a 4-4-2 formation. Tielemans and Onana sat in that midfield central role, Bailey on the right, McGinn on the left, and then we had Rodgers and Watkins in that kind of central area, looking to trigger the counter-attack or looking to trigger that press when Arsenal did look to knock the ball around in their own third, as an example. Now, when they wanted to press high, they changed immediately into a 4-2-4, meaning that McGinn and Bailey then pushed on when Arsenal were knocking around the ball in their own final, in their own back third, should I say. That was the difference out of possession for Aston Villa. No press 4-4-2, and then a much more intense, aggressive press when Arsenal were knocking it back in that 4-2-4 formation. In possession, very similar to what we see with a lot of Premier League clubs now, unless you're kind of in that sort of lower part of the table. But a lot of the sort of more free-flowing teams in the Premier League nowadays play that similar sort of formation, similar sort of tactical approach and system with 3 at the back, 2 in midfield. The 2 that I just mentioned there, Onana and Tielemans, sitting in front of the back 4, both sort of taking turns to push and join in the attack of the 5, which was obviously Rodgers slightly to the right-hand side of Watkins, operating in a kind of 8/10 position because he was one of the forwards today. Bailey on the right. Now, McGinn took up a very interesting position, sometimes as a left winger when they wanted to be a 4 in attack, and other times as an 8, slightly deeper, allowing Digne to sort of push on the overlap from the left-hand side. And that's pretty much, from a tactical point of view, for both Arsenal and Aston Villa, how they set up today. And if we take a quick look here at some of the graphs very quickly, here we go. We can have a look at the average positioning of both sides. So we're looking here initially at Aston Villa. If we zoom in a little bit so you can have a better look. This is how Aston Villa looked on paper from an average position point of view. So we can see here the 4 defenders, 12, 14, 4 and 2. And then we can see the 4 midfield players that I just mentioned a minute ago, and then the 2 forward players. And for the majority of this game, or for large parts of this game, the reason why the average positions look like this as a 4-4-2 is Arsenal did have their fair share of possession. We can come down here to the match stats, and we can see here that Arsenal did have 61% possession in the end. In the first half, much more dominant, although it didn't feel like that at times, and we'll go through that in just a moment. 69% possession. And in the second half, a little bit more equal. But because of the overall way that the game sort of felt at times, this is why when we look at those average positions, Aston Villa very much look like a 4-4-2 when you analyse it. Arsenal, again, no real surprises here. We've got the back 4 with Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel and Yuri Timber. Timber tucked in quite a bit, as you can see, tucking into midfield, playing alongside Thomas Partey here, who's playing in that kind of half space quite a bit. Not as much with Timber. We can see here that he's slightly more defensively, and I think that changed in the second half because there were a few times after the 25-minute mark where Arsenal got caught out. Arsenal very much dominated possession for the first sort of 25 minutes of that first half before things kind of opened up. Even though it was very, very slow, that's where things changed at around about the 25-minute mark. Declan Rice playing on the left-hand side in that left half space. One thing that does surprise me about this particular graph as well is, I think if we take ourselves back to a couple of years ago, we often saw this Granit Xhaka, Zinchenko, 2 players very much on top of each other when we looked at the average positions. And then moving into a slightly more advanced part of the game, Martinelli on the left-hand side, Kai Havertz through the middle, and then Odegaard and Saka on the right-hand side. Odegaard and Saka linked up very, very well on that right-hand side today, especially in that second half. That last 20 minutes, the combinations between Saka, Odegaard, Ben White, and even Thomas Partey, who was often getting involved on that right-hand side. Very, very influential indeed. But if we go through some of what happens in that first half, some of the sort of question marks that I have, shall we say, what I'll do as well, just for the benefit of the live show, is pull up some of the stats for the game. So the first half, it was a much slower tempo than I was expecting. It wasn't the sort of game of football that most thought we would get. And it didn't really kind of spring into life until around about the 55, 60 minute mark. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But that was when it really, really did kind of spring into life. And we saw a couple of chances in the first half. Aston Villa probably being gifted with the best opportunity of the first half. Gabriel being caught in possession. And I say caught in possession, and it's probably a bit of a difficult one for him. Unless you go back and look at the replays, it might be something that you missed. In real time, you probably think, why isn't Gabriel just knocking the ball long? You know, what's going through his head? Now, if you go back and look at the game, typically when Gabriel receives the ball in the left centre-back position, he will have his left back available to him on the left-hand side, in the left-back position, obviously. But because Timber was tucking into midfield, that's exactly where Timber was. Timber was in front of Gabriel alongside Thomas Partey when he received the ball. So the natural position for him is to go to the left-hand side, but there was no one there. And he gets caught in possession. And Arsenal massively let off. Rodgers picks up the ball after Bailey won it, and plays a square pass to Ollie Watkins, who's completely free and one-on-one with the goalkeeper and puts it wide. You would normally bet your house on Ollie Watkins scoring from there. So a huge, huge let-off for Arsenal. There were plenty of half chances for both sides, half chances and, you know, promising attacks in the first half. Arsenal's best attack came in the 16th minute from none other than Bukayo Saka. Surprise, surprise. Picks up the ball on the right-hand side, comes inside, you know, wanting to get onto that left foot, and looks to put the ball in to the far bottom corner, which is met equally by Emi Martinez. The only other incident in the first half was between McGinn and Saliba. Saliba goes down off the back of a challenge. McGinn kicks the ball into him, and then Ben White kicks the ball into McGinn. Bit of handbags, really, if you ask me. Nothing really came of it, but a very, I suppose, not boring, but not the sort of first half that we expected from Villa or Arsenal, to be honest with you. I expected a much sort of higher tempo, much better quality from both sides, but it very much felt like Arsenal and Aston Villa cancelled each other out in that first half, to say the very least. Now, during half-time, speaking to various different Arsenal fans in WhatsApp groups and social media and whatever else that I'm on, and for me personally, when I was sort of speaking to people, it was either we need to make a change on the 55th, 60th minute. Let's not wait until the sort of 75 minutes plus that we're used to from Arteta. We need to make a change early doors, or something needs to change slightly tactically to completely change this game. And boy, did we get something. It wasn't a player in terms of someone coming on, and it wasn't a tactical change. It was an opportunity from Aston Villa that sprung the whole game into life, and it was a save from David Raya. So on screen now, we can see here the ball is coming across the 18-yard box, which is going to be struck. And eventually, we can see here, it takes a deflection off of Gabriel. David Raya is in a pretty good position, and it's looping over him. So he's scrambling backwards to try and pick the ball up, as you would do, save it. It hits the bar, and then David Raya is on the ground at this point, and you half expect, you can see Ollie Watkins with the way he's lining up with his body shape. You can see Ollie Watkins lining himself up to pretty much knock it into, well, what is effectively an open goal. He heads it down, and David Raya manages to somehow pick himself up and save it off the line. But not only save it off the line, but he manages to get enough power in the save to push it completely away from the goal, because we can see yet here another Aston Villa player coming in to essentially pick up the scraps. And you see it also often after that save, there's someone there following it in, what all good forwards do, to make it 1-0, which is what a lot of people expected at this point in the game. Now, what changed the game was this save. And the reason I say this is it really sparked into life. Aston Villa felt that there was an opportunity there to get at Arsenal, but Arsenal also recognising that we needed to pull our fingers out, really. And it was a very subpar performance from Arsenal up until that point. You were just waiting for them to spring into life. And one of the performances that we probably will talk about in a short while, Martinelli had a very, if I put it politely, a very bang average game. The sort of performance that he probably won't start our next game. I know that Arteta loves to show belief in players, to show them the confidence so that they can come back and repay that. But in these types of games, these are, like I said at the start of today's show, these are the types of games that come the end of the season, if you drop points, it comes back to haunt you, especially away from home. You want to make sure that you, at the very least, do not lose the game. And when you've got someone like Martinelli on the left-hand side, he's just not quite up to the standard that we're used to seeing against a fullback who has never played in the Premier League before. That doesn't mean that he's not of the right quality to play in the Premier League, but it's his debut. You know, he's playing against, Arsenal. There's going to be some nerves there. It's a great opportunity for someone like Martinelli to really kind of kick on. But unfortunately for him, he was brought off, and on steps none other than Leandro Trossard, who did have a good pre-season and probably asking some questions. What have I got to do to start a game? What have I got to do to get in this starting lineup? And I do think that he certainly answered that question, because when it looked like Aston Villa were building up some momentum, when it looked like Aston Villa was starting to get on top, Arsenal being limited with the opportunities that they were being given, at the 66-minute mark, 67-minute mark, we can see here on the right-hand side, we've got Bukayo Saka, who delivers the ball into the box. Now, they were in real time, I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm sure there's a few other Arsenal fans that felt the same. I wasn't quite sure at this point. The reason I paused it here is at this exact moment in time, I wasn't actually sure whether or not the ball had crossed the line. And obviously, the officials are going to allow play to run on, see how everything unfolds, and then VAR are going to review it. But we can see here it's difficult to see from this particular picture, but I can assure you it's definitely in. Anywho, Saka does play the ball in. We can see here that Kai Havertz goes for it, which prompts the Aston Villa player to go in for the 50-50. And it really, fortunately, then lands to Leandro Trossard, who instinctively, doesn't need to take a touch, instinctively hits the ball first time. You can see here, Martinez is going one way to his right-hand side, and Trossard hits it in the opposite direction, making it really difficult for Martinez to get down in time and save that ball. And this comes at such a crucial time in the game. As I said, Arsenal were very much not being dominated, but it felt like the pressure was building for Aston Villa. They're at home, not too long before this, around 10 minutes before this, David Raya had to make an unbelievable world-class save to keep Arsenal in the game. 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, that probably goes in for most teams. And the momentum was very much sort of forming in Aston Villa's favour. Leandro Trossard comes on with a point to prove, and he has that instant impact for Arsenal to make it 1-0. all of the hard work from Aston Villa, complete waste of time. Arsenal are back in the game. And then for someone who's been under a lot of pressure in recent weeks for Arsenal, going all the way back to last season, Thomas Partey was often criticised because of his injuries, because of his consistency. I've been one of those Arsenal fans that have done it in a constructive way, not been, super negative about it. But again, we talked about it last week after the game against Wolves. Is Thomas Partey the right player? Is it just because it's the first game of the season? Is this why Arsenal are looking to bring in Mikel Moreno? And there were flashes of what we've seen from Thomas Partey in the past in that first half, with the way he protects the ball, with the tackles he wins, the passing, but it's not consistent enough throughout the 90 minutes. And maybe, just maybe, it was a moment like this that he needed to really kind of kick on now and show Arsenal fans that he is here for the season to do a job. This is the sort of moment I feel like Martinelli needs as well, to kick on and be a bright spark for Arsenal. But unfortunately, in this clip, moments before Bukayo Saka picks up the ball where he's got it, over here on the left-hand side, Trossard had picked up the ball from a fantastic through ball where he found himself in acres of space, and he puts a cross in right across the face of goal, which no one is able to tap in, which is eventually picked up here at the back by Bukayo Saka. He does what he usually does and stands up his man, asking that question. You look here, look very quickly. Thomas Partey's here on the edge of the box. Okay, Ben White also. But all of these Aston Villa players, right? You can literally throw a blanket over them. And it just shows you the sort of fear that Bukayo Saka puts into teams, right? Now, look at how all of them are drawn towards the ball. They're not aware enough to the dangers on the edge of the box. So if we just play this very, very slowly, see how they're all slowly being drawn towards the ball. Ben White makes a really, really intelligent run. Again, making sure that some of these Aston Villa players stay where they are, essentially, because they don't want to allow Ben White to get into this area of the pitch with space to put another ball in across the goal. So they're all focusing on Saka and Ben White. Thomas Partey continues to have absolutely acres and acres of space. And when he does play, we've seen him do it hundreds and hundreds of times. There's memes, jokes about how he absolutely smashes the ball into row Z. But when it works phenomenally well. And again, it comes at a really important time in the game, around 10 minutes or so after Arsenal's first goal. Because at 1-0, Aston Villa at home, crowd up on their backs, trying to get them back into the game. And anything can happen. And Arsenal needed a moment to really kill things off. And Thomas Partey is the one that steps up. We see here the ball eventually hits it first time. Now, this time, when we look at Martinez, there isn't that massive shift. I can only imagine when you expect Martinez probably to save this, but I can only imagine that we can see here, I think it's Pau Torres is slightly in the way, blocking Martinez's vision of the ball, taking nothing away from Thomas Partey, by the way. He's done what all good midfield players do when receiving the ball in this position, when striking the ball at goal. Hit it with power, hit it with pace, get it on target, and make sure you ask the question of the goalkeeper, which is exactly what he does. And he is rewarded with that question that he asks. And it couldn't have happened to a better goalkeeper, in my opinion. So, what are your thoughts? Not many comments coming in from the chat as it stands. Let me know your thoughts on the game. What do we need moving forwards? What players should we be looking to talk about in the remainder of today's show? Please do let me know. And just whilst I'm waiting for some of those comments to come in, we'll go through some of your previous comments. So starting at the very top, Chippy Boy here suggesting that Trossard needs to start our next game. We looked very rusty. You can see players have missed pre-season. Absolutely agree. I think there are probably a couple of players. I think Declan Rice, I think the levels that we're used to seeing from Declan Rice last season, he looks very, very tired. Again, suggesting that Gabriel was fouled in the opportunity that Villa had in the first half. Still not as good as David Seaman at Old Trafford in the FA Cup semi-final against, I think it was Sheffield United. Martinelli hasn't been the same now for a year since his injury. Absolutely right. He's not been the player that we were used to a couple of seasons ago, where he scored, I think it was 15 Premier League goals. Gorgeous by Trossard. Yeah, absolutely. Really does step up when needed for Arsenal. Martinelli needs to work on the final pass. Trossard tends to make the difference when games like this are happening. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely spot on. There were a couple of occasions in the game where I felt like he got into a really good position, Martinelli that is, a couple of times on the counter-attack where it felt like we could have opened something up or created a really good opportunity for one of the other attacking players. And it just felt like he got caught in two minds, whether it be, the final pass, the quality of the pass not being quite right, or the decision in what to do not being quite right. So I have to absolutely agree with you there. Shocking goalkeeping. I'm assuming that's referencing what we were just talking about with regards to Emi Martinez. So unlucky, Emi. Another comment coming in here. Timber needs to have a run of games. Completely agree. Yeah. So we got 15 minutes last week. A big chunk today as well. He's like a new signing for Arsenal. And the more he plays in this team, the better he builds up that fitness and familiarity in games, the better. You can certainly see why Arsenal signed him. There were definitely glimpses today of why Arsenal spent the money to bring him in last summer. And then finally, before we take a look at some of the players, hard-fought win against a tricky opponent, but this will show where we need to tweak lineup and tactics. Absolutely, very tricky opponent where we dropped all points last season. So not only is it good from a revenge point of view, obviously, but it shows that we are ready to get over those hurdles in this upcoming season, potentially. A game-by-game performance, still a win is a win. Absolutely spot on. Timber needs to stop. I'm not sure what that stop playing in midfield. Right, yeah. It's a bit of an interesting one because he did play in midfield. I remember the last pre-season where he played on the right-hand side and he seemed a lot more comfortable. And I don't know if it's because he's coming in from the left. Shouldn't make that much of a difference. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. That left-back role very much seems open for competition at the moment, whether it's Timber, Calafiori, Tomiyasu, Zinchenko. We've got a whole host of options on that left-hand side. And some of those players can also play right-back and centre-back as well. So really does open things up. So we'll talk about a few players. We'll check their stats up as well. I think some of the more obvious ones, again, are going to be, where is he? Leandro Trossard, obviously very influential when he came on for Gabriel Martinelli, only playing the 25 minutes, got himself a goal. And arguably, he was, I know it wasn't him directly who passed the ball to Thomas Partey, but it was his run that opened up things that really kind of pushed Aston Villa back, sort of catching them off guard, if you will, that really kind of helped open up things for the second goal as well. So massively, massively influential today in that 25 minutes. I suppose the question that you've got to ask here with regards to Leandro Trossard is, does he play the next game? Would you start him in the next game? Or would you continue to show faith in Martinelli to not knock his confidence? Maybe it has the opposite effect. Maybe it gives him a bit of a kick up the backside, Martinelli that is, to really kind of drive and ask questions of himself. What would you do? Would you go with Trossard and reward his performances in the first couple of games this season? Or would you continue to show faith in Martinelli, hoping that at some stage, he nicks himself a goal or something like that, gives himself the confidence booster that we all want him to have, and kick on for the season? So do let me know in the chat. So that was a pretty obvious one. I think the other one that we need to talk about is Thomas Partey. I was quite critical of him last week after the Wolves game. He seemed to have a decent-ish game in the first half against Wolves, and then he really did kind of fizzle out in the second half. And it felt a little bit like that today, as I kind of touched on earlier. There were glimpses of the Thomas Partey we've seen in the past, the good Thomas Partey in the first half, good passing, quick passing in transition, really done well in protecting the back four, some really good tackles to break up play when it was really, really important on the counter-attack. A few tactical fouls in there as well, if you will. Start of the first half, he went very, very quiet and didn't really turn up too much until that goal. And you could argue that, to a degree, that same level of faith is being shown in Thomas Partey, like Martinelli, in the hope that he does kick on. Because let's be real for a second here. We've pretty much signed Mikel Moreno. I don't want to jinx it. But when he does come in, we have to appreciate that, like Calafiori, he's going to need time to settle in, to adjust, understand the system that Arsenal play. So I can't see Moreno just being literally thrown into the deep end after the international break. I do feel as though that we may have to wait a couple of weeks before we see him starting games potentially. Thomas Partey potentially knows this. Even though he's in the last year of his contract, he's going to want to be playing football every single week, right? So is he trying to give Arteta a bit of a headache? Or does he know, regardless of these performances, that once Mikel Moreno is up to speed, he's going to be nothing more than a squad player, coming in the last 15 to 20 minutes of games to shore them up, playing in those those cup competitions or the games that don't really mean anything as much, shall we say. But look, he had a good game today. 90% passing accuracy, which is good, rewarded with a goal. Getting involved with some of the tackles there, interceptions, duels were on the low side. So, there's definitely a lot more to be desired. And we're going to need him after the international break. We are going to need him this season, whether you like Thomas Partey, whether you're a fan of him or not, whether your confidence is worn thin with him now. We are going to need him and Jorginho this season. So let's have a look at some of your comments with regards to the first two players that we've taken a look at. Chippy Boy definitely wants Leandro Trossard to start after the international break. We do have an international break coming up, so it'll be interesting to see what happens afterwards. Absolutely. Arteta does speak a lot about rewarding players for their hard work in training. Is that the sort of generic media spiel, or does he actually mean it? We do know that last season and the season before, he does have not his favourites, but he does tend to use the same set of players quite often. Saliba was good today, and our keeper wasn't bad too. Yes, I will be looking at Saliba in just a moment, because he's just the ever-present at the back. Mourinho will start soon enough. Absolutely agree. And Thomas Partey will be injured after the international break. Yeah, it's a difficult one with Thomas Partey, and I think that's why we've kept the likes of Jorginho around as well, because we do know that he does pick up his injuries, unfortunately. So William Saliba is the third player that I want to have a quick chat about today. Always seems to be in the right place at the right time. There was an instance, I think, in like the last 10 minutes of the game where I can't remember the name of the player now, the Aston Villa player. I think it might have been Duran, was pretty much through on goal. You half expected him to take a shot, and the pace, the ability to track back and get into the position that he got into to basically put Duran off was just absolutely sensational. There were instances in the first half where you didn't expect him to win the tackle, or you didn't expect him to win the duel because of the position that he was in. He manages to find a way, and his partnership with Gabriel at the back, just absolutely top draw, sensational stuff. I don't often speak about Saliba, and it's not because I don't rate him or I don't think he's good. I just think he's one of those players that we've come to expect to do the job at centre-back now every single week. And he always manages to do it, regardless of who the opposition is, whether we're playing against with all due respect, smaller teams, bigger players, smaller players, quicker players. Internationally now, we know he stepped up as well. Him staying fit for Arsenal this season is going to be absolutely key, alongside Gabriel, of course. 4 clearances, 4 tackles in total, winning 7 of his 12 duels, and 99%, I don't know if you just saw that, sorry, 99% accuracy in his passing. It's difficult to say a bad thing about William Saliba. What a player he is, and no surprise, he was in the PFA team of the season for last year either. And I suppose naturally we could speak about Gabriel being his centre-back partner, who had a really good game today. Ben White played really well. Saka had a good game. But I think naturally, even last week we spoke about him. He's made 3 saves today. The stats don't really tell the full story of what David Raya does for Arsenal. Now, it says here, where is it? Can we see crosses claimed? Is it anything like that? There were a couple of occasions where, balls came into the box and he's either claimed the ball or he's punched it clear. His passing accuracy when Arsenal want to play out from the back, or when he wants to clip the ball into midfield and start a counter-attack or push on a move, is just absolutely phenomenal. But what I really want to talk about is, going back to the save, because if we take a look at this again, this is the 2nd week in a row now that David Raya has pulled out a world-class save. And we just play it on again, as we can see here. If you see the position of Watkins, you would 100% expect Watkins to score from here. And you look at the time in the game as well, away from home. If Watkins scores here after being unlucky to not maybe pick himself up a goal or two in the first 50 odd minutes of the game, not that you fully expect Aston Villa to kick on, but then, the questions get asked of Arsenal, then Villa can sit back and hit Arsenal on the counter-attack. We're a lot more kind of exposed in that sense. Arsenal really need to go for a point. And, Villa have had their chances. I suppose you have to ask the question of whether or not Arsenal can keep getting away with allowing these sorts of chances to be created. It's happened early enough in the season and been dealt with, thankfully, where it isn't going to come back to bite us in the backside, but it gives us an opportunity now with the international break coming up to really look at things defensively, because not much has changed from a defensive point of view. You could argue left back, we've got more options and we've got more depth defensively in general, but not much has changed for Arsenal defensively. That could change when Timber is, fully match fit, and the same with Calafiori as well. We might seem a little bit more solid. Not that we're not, because we had, the best defence in the Premier League last season as an example. But there have been a few occasions in the Villa game and the Wolves game now where I just want Arsenal to tighten up a little bit, because we've got, I think it's Spurs and Man City in our next couple of games. And I just feel like we might be punished a little more if we're allowing these types of opportunities to be given to slightly better opposition in Spurs. City is the one that worries me the most, because they really have come flying out the traps this season to start things off. So we'll have to wait and see. But there were some phenomenal performances from Arsenal today. We've managed to go away at Villa Park, which is a really, really tough ground to go to and even pick up a point, let alone 3. Overcome those demons from last season, where arguably 1 or 2 of those results could have been the reason why we lost out on the Premier League. So it's another hurdle that we've overcome for sure. Arsenal sitting pretty now on 6 points to kick off the Premier League campaign. We don't tend to make things easy at times, and today was certainly not one of those cases. But we did, as Chippy Boy quite rightly points out, we have kept 2 clean sheets, and that's why you need to have a quality goalkeeper. As they say, goals win you games, defences win you titles, and that is certainly coming to the forefront from some of the things that we've seen from David Raya, at least, in the last 2 games. Now, that is going to about wrap things up for today's live show. Do get your man of the matches down in the comments below or in the chat box so I can take a look at that. If you have enjoyed, do go ahead and smash the like button. It lets me know that you enjoy these shows. It lets me know that you enjoy the format of these shows. And if there's anything that you'd like to see included in future shows in terms of how we break things down, maybe some graphics, maybe some stats, do let me know down in the comments and we can look to include those in future live shows. If there's any way I can enhance this even more than it already is, all comments are welcome. So do let me know down in the comments below and hit that like button, as I say, to let me know you are enjoying the format. And also, if you are enjoying, subscribe if you haven't done so already, so that you don't miss out on any of the future shows just like this and any other content that I'm bringing you on a weekly basis, which now does include Arsenal news. I'm not going to be one of these channels that posts videos for the sake of posting videos on news. If there's some news to bring you, we will take a look at it. We will talk about it. We'll break it down. I'll take your comments and we'll look at it from there. Previews as well is something that I'm looking to bring back. So if you're looking forward to all of that stuff, you want to get involved, do go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out. And for now, I'm JC. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you have enjoyed. But for now, take care, stay safe, and come on, you Gunners.